Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you are here. Welcome to the Starseed Ministry. Usually we are live on Monday mornings, Eastern Standard Time, but because there is still work going on at my house right next to my studio, I wanted to record the Starseed Ministry and have it available still at the regular time, but without all of the distraction and the residual noise, and truly the energy coming into my space that I just don't have any control over. And it became very clear to me over the weekend when a lot of that energy really settled down, how much of that was impacting me and my ability to be a clear channel and to not be influenced by the reverberations that I just don't have any control over. So, of course, this is a really good reason to continue to work on your own field, right? Just like the toroidal field that you see on the green screen behind me, to have that strong resonance coming from the heart space that has the ability to be a semi-permeable membrane, to shield or buffer that which you really don't want in your space, but also not to block everything out that you want to come in. And sometimes that's really difficult to do when you realize that there's a lot that you want to block out and buffer. And sometimes that keeps things from seeping in that you actually want to be in your awareness. So we're recording this today. So either way, thank you for being here. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a good weekend. If, in fact, it was your weekend, I spent a lot of time in the service industry, so I know that the Saturday, Sunday on the calendar isn't exactly the weekend, but, this is where we're at right now. So I hope everyone is doing well. I have a reading to share with you today. We'll go over some of the astrology. Today is our third quarter moon. Mars in Gemini will be in a trine to the sun, and we're going to look at some fixed stars today. There's a lot of fixed star astrology that is wrapped up in the transiting astrology, especially with the third quarter moon in a square to the sun, which is conjunct Arcturus. It's conjunct the fixed star Spica. They actually are just about an exact alignment in terms of their longitude. They are in different latitudes. They're in different constellations, but we're going to go over the fixed star astrology that is relevant to today's transiting astrology and really kind of get into the story of things, look at where these fixed stars are, the constellations, what they represent. A lot of times fixed stars will rule certain aspects of the body, so we'll look at that as well. That's a really good segue actually into just reminding those who have not signed up, if you may still be interested, open enrollment for the 21-day Vinyasa Yoga program. It will be open enrollment throughout the whole time, because even if you are not starting along with the rest of the group, if you change your mind later on, you can still have access to all of the content that is a progressive creation of a full Vinyasa yoga program. So I'll share with you the promotional material here in a moment. I have to say, and I know that other people have expressed this as well in their own way, but Mercury has left its post-retrograde shadow as of yesterday into today, and I have never been more enthused, I think, since I started really studying astrology. I don't think I've been more enthused for a Mercury to come out of not only retrograde, but to come out of its shadow. It has been quite an interesting and very difficult and challenging Mercury retrograde. And this is coming from someone who has a natal Mercury retrograde, which most of the time, at least in my experience, and certainly with the clients that I've worked with, that when you have a natal Mercury already retrograde in your chart, you tend to not be nearly as impacted negatively by a retrograde Mercury, which happens multiple times a year, because it is a function of relativity, of speed and distance, and where we're at in relation to the sun. So it looks like that Mercury is moving backwards in its orbit, when in fact it's just a relationship we have to Mercury in relation to where we are and our position around the sun versus Mercury. So Mercury is the planet closest to the sun, and so it is moving the most rapidly. So we get Mercury retrogrades multiple times a year, so it's not something to necessarily be afraid of or to shut your entire life down. And if you do have Mercury retrograde in your natal chart, you tend to be much more in tune to the internalized mental processes that a Mercury retrograde will represent. But man, I cannot express enough how excited I am for Mercury to finally leave its shadow and move into new territory. It is truly a relief in many ways, and there has been so much reverberation, so much disturbance in the force, so much disturbance within ourselves in so many ways, that to come out to the other side now, to like come out of that white water and the really drastic rapids of our own emotions, and to be able to reflect on those experiences with a calm mind and some serenity has been a very welcome change. For lack of a better, I know change is inevitable, but I for one am really excited. So let us know in the comments how your Mercury retrograde has been, and if you are in fact really feeling the relief as well in your mind of like, wow, we just went through all of that, right? We just went through all of that. And the full moon, certainly in Aries, was not the least of all of this disturbance, especially conjunct Chiron. So I just wanted to put that out there straight away. So we all know where we're sitting astrologically, that Mercury is now out of its post-retrograde shadow. And what does that even mean? Well, that means that this was the degree that Mercury stationed retrograde to begin with, which was 8 to 9 degrees of Libra. So now it has moved beyond that point and moving into new territory for the mind to chew on and to process and to learn from and to communicate and express, and all of the conceptual energy that Mercury represents for us. It's truly the functioning of our nervous system, our sensory perception, and specifically perception, and the way that our neural pathways function, the way that we process information. And this is how our consciousness actually develops and expands into understanding, which is Sagittarius, and the opposite of Gemini, which is the ruling sign of Mercury. So I, for one, am very pleased and truly relieved. So there does feel to me, and when we get into the reading, you're going to see this as well, that there's been a completion point. There has been a zenith of development. There has been a full cycle coming around. And of course, again, Mercury is certainly part of it. But it feels to me that through the course of this full moon that we just had, this whole lunar cycle really, and truly finishing up the last eclipse cycle that started in May and June in the Pleiadian territory, right? Late Taurus and Scorpio. We're about to start the new eclipse season, and we're in different territory now. We're in much more Andromeda territory, right? The North Node is in the Andromeda constellation now. We're going to have a new moon lunar eclipse on the 25th. It's going to be in the very beginning of Scorpio. Venus and the Sun are going to be conjunct very soon at the very last degrees of Libra into Scorpio. So important to embody this illumination, this energy, this holistic approach to knowledge, that experience is truly where we understand ourselves. Because once we move into Scorpio territory, especially having an eclipse right after that, it's going to be pretty interesting. And as with all eclipses, there is soul work that is deeply embedded and will not really find full resolution until the end of the eclipse cycle, which is going to take us out 6 months from now into April, when the sun comes back around to Taurus and the nodes of the moon are still in Taurus and Scorpio. So Venus, when she moves into Scorpio, she is in her detriment. It is not a powerful position because she is at home in the opposite sign of Taurus. And so that conjunction with the Sun and Venus is going to be very instrumental in our embodied understanding, our identification, and spiritual individual sustainment with this idea of holistic approach to knowledge, the threefold approach of experience spanning the spectrum of both sides of the Libra scales in order to come to that third point of synthesis. Because when we go into Scorpio, this is where the feels and the power itself is really the place that we're touching upon. And Venus is not very she's just not very dignified in Scorpio. She easily drowns in her own debauchery here. And for those of you who have Venus in Scorpio, me too, you know all about this. And it's a very difficult place for that sense of embodiment, that sense of security and comfort to start sinking into the abyss of our own shadow. So these are important times right now to take advantage in many ways of these moments of like, oh, something has come full circle for me and newness is on its way. But with the eclipses, it's going to be something that is deeply, deeply embedded. And of course, with Scorpio time, that is the time where the seed goes through its own shadow work. It goes through its own dark night. It becomes it hibernates, the seed, right? The seed that will turn into the germ and the new life come the spring and the vernal equinox, but it's still got to go through all of its cycle of going into the underworld. So it's going to be a whole new set of challenges, right? And there are aspects that are still deeply embedded right now. And actually, when we look at the fixed stars that are relevant to today's astrology, we have asteroid Juno, asteroid Ceres. They are in exact opposition today along the axis of Draco. So there are so many things to talk about today. So let's just get right into it. The first thing I would like to do is just share a little bit of the space weather with you guys, and also share with you the fact that I've dropped the first, here we go. The first session of this next theme for the Catalyst Classroom. This is for monthly subscribers, those who are members of the Catalyst Classroom. You have access to this material already. And we're going to be talking about the sun and everything that has to do with our star. And so the first session was all about stellar physics, right? This physics of stars, the solar weather, how to read the data, how to understand it, and really just get a foundation of more of the science and materialistic side of things with the sun, so that when we start bringing the esoteric and the more symbolic aspects in with the astrology, mythology, cosmology, and more of the alternative woo-woo aspects, we at least have this foundation of the materialist aspect, so we can also synthesize this material as well. So that's something that you can get more information about by going to catalystenergies.net. That's linked in the description box below, and you can get more information about this particular session and how to sign up. So I do want to share with you, though, the space weather, just real briefly, right? So just to get an idea here of what we are looking at for right now, because this is a big part of understanding ourselves and our place in the cosmos, is understanding at the very least our star and how we have a relationship with it, how the earth has a relationship with it, how we are all in a relationship with each other. So you can see here that this is the planetary index. This measures geomagnetic disturbance. This is something that I went into way more detail in the Catalyst Classroom. So for those of you that are part of that, then you already got this information and you know how to read this chart now. Put simply, though, you can see that there's been some geomagnetic unrest, right? The magnetosphere has been disturbed as the result of some solar wind reaching us from the sun, but it is starting to settle down now. So as it comes from red into yellow, and then green is stable. And that is a measurement of the disturbance in the magnetosphere. So and when you have these disturbances, people have all kinds of different symptoms. Sleeping can be really difficult. People may have headaches. They may have any inflammation, right? They may have cardiac problems, psychological disturbances, all come along with geomagnetic unrest. Of course, there is the connection to the ionosphere and how that impacts things like communications and satellites and aviation and GPS, but also how it affects us and living beings. Anything with a magnetic field or an electrical component, which is pretty much anything organic, and even, I would argue, inorganic when we talk about certain minerals and crystals. Anything with a magnetic field is going to be impacted in some way when there is a disturbance in the geomagnetics. So things over the weekend, definitely we got some disturbance, and it's starting to calm down right now. So I also had a big earthquake. Actually, yesterday morning into the afternoon, it was a 6.3 earthquake. It was off the coast of Central and South America, Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, this area. So it was out in the ocean, right? But it was a pretty big one. Between 6 and 7 is pretty big. So that's something that I always track too, is the seismic activity, because there is, in fact, connections to the seismic activity from the plasma that comes from the sun, the fact that it has an impact on the ionosphere and the geoelectric circuit. And there are more papers, more research coming out that is making the connection now that the impact of the sun and how it affects the geoelectric circuit, right? The electrical impact on our ionosphere, which is a electrically charged portion of our atmosphere, actually has a connection to seismic activity. And in my experience, as many of you probably have had in your own experience or heard me talk about already, there is this network, right? There is this mycelial network, a set of capillaries, a whole structure under the crust of the planet that is electrical, right? And I don't know all of the details about this yet. And there's a connection between the atmosphere and in the planet itself, that this is what Tesla was really tapping into. And in my own work, I've definitely tapped into this through my own energetic channel as well, and have often tap into it through my own Earth Star chakra. So that's something that I've talked about quite a bit with my membership and on these videos as well. So just wanted to share that there was a big earthquake as well. So just before we get into the fullness of this reading today, I just want to bring up a couple more things, guys, just to let you know, because not everybody's on my email list, but you may want to consider that, because this is where you get all the information first and foremost. You go to catalystenergies.net and you can sign up for the email list. You get about 3 emails a month, and it just lets you know what I'm offering and updates you on the videos and the transmissions as well. So this is starting today. For those of you who are signed up and waiting for the first video, just sit tight. I gotta, again, be crafty about when the contractors show up and not being disturbed. So I'm gonna wait till they leave later today and make the first video, which is gonna be very introductory. We're gonna go over pranayama. We're gonna go over warming up. We're gonna go over some of the ideas about yoga and vinyasa yoga, right, which is a flow style of hatha or physical yoga that tends to get left out in the West, right? So actually, somebody that had signed up sent me a message this morning, or at least I read it this morning, that was saying that they're really interested in this spiritual component because they never heard it before. And that is so common when it comes to the practice of physical yoga here in the West. It is stripped away from the equation entirely, which is very problematic, considering the fact that hatha yoga in particular, any kind of physical yoga, is the way that we condition and prepare the body to receive higher energy, higher resonant energy, okay? It is not an end in itself, which is exactly what has happened when yoga came to the West. That wasn't the intention, but that is what has happened. So if that is where your interest is and it ends there, then it's very attractive to you. But for those who have never really felt very compelled, and as a person who has been trained to teach, I never ended up teaching. I went to India and studied yoga and Ayurveda, and my teachers always stress that the most important thing and the first thing you do is pray. It is a prayer to God before doing anything, and that is one of the biggest gaps that I found with yoga in the West, and which is why I never pursued teaching classes, because it was not something that I was interested in necessarily reinforcing. But now I'm offering this program that is at a sliding scale. You can move at your own pace. You get a new video every day with the posture, what it's for, the modifications, verbal cues, right? There's no reason to be intimidated here, because this is about meeting your body where it's at and using the breath to stretch those boundaries that are ready to expand, okay? So this is really meant for people that are for all number of reasons, never really felt that they resonated with the practice. And this is meant to give a different perspective. So you can also register for this through catalystenergies.net on the homepage under current offerings, and $22 to $88 sliding scale. Okay. So again, this is open enrollment, so you don't have to decide right now. And if you decide later, you'll still get all of the content, and you can still do it at your own pace, and you have access to all of the videos forever. So that's one thing I wanted to share with you. Also, really, really quick, is that the lunar transit forecast is open for Taurus and Scorpio folks. Now, if you are interested in the full eclipse cycle for your sign, if you're a Taurus or Scorpio sun, moon, and rising, I'm going to be putting out that content and that promotional material very soon. Again, if you're not on my email list, you may want to do that. But this sale rate is available for Taurus and Scorpio, sun, moon, and rising people. If you want to get an idea of how the next lunar cycle, which is October, end of October into the end of November, this is going to be really such a pivotal time for all of us. So if you want to get an idea of what this month's going to look like for you as the representatives of not only this next lunar cycle, but the eclipses, this is available to you as well. So, all right, now that we got all of the spiel out of the way, we can get into the juicy stuff, which is the reading that I am offering to you and transmitting to you that I received this morning in my own practice. So let me find the reading here. Here we go. Okay, so what I see here is our causal factor as the universe, number 21, which adds up to 3. This is the end of the major arcana of the tarot, right? The major trump cards. It starts with 0, which is the full, and takes us up to 21, which is the world or the universe. Now, this signals to me, and I've been feeling it certainly in my own life, that there is a cycle that is completing, right? We have come full circle with something and accomplished something. So this card is often related to the earth element, Saturn. And when we think about Saturn as the representative of the materium or of the boundary of reality or the Lord of time, there is a beginning and an end to the cycle when we're talking about the materium. So there is some sort of accomplishment or a goal that's been accomplished, something that has been achieved or come full circle. Now, this is interesting because we have this as our causal factor, and we look at this horizontal axis as a cause and effect relationship, strictly in kind of the third density realm. It's in the vertical axis, I've talked about many times, just like in the astrology chart, where our power really resides, where we are drawing power from, where are pulling power in, right? And also where it's being released out of the crown. And then we have this impact or this effect that is the most likely based on all of these factors. And then, of course, surrounding this is the guidance. And, you know, there are 9 cards in this spread, which never really even occurred to me until quite recently. So I thought that was pretty amazing, considering that I didn't intend for that. This is just what originally came out as the structure, and I've just stuck with it ever since. And now I realize how much that is like a culminating point here. The number 9, of course, 3, 6, and 9, frequency, energy, and vibration, right? This is what Tesla's talked about. So when we look at all of the cards up close and specific, you know, this is the spread here. Now we have the Ace of Cups right here. You know, this is new love. This is healing and regeneration. This is new friendship, wanting to reach out emotionally. Now it came out in this horizontal position. So I think there is still a little bit of trepidation. There's still a little bit of unsureness. There's still kind of like we haven't fully resonated, even though we know a new seed of love and spirit and friendship, right? The beauty of love, the cup overflowing from both ends. It's not quite upright yet. So there's still something here that we have not quite either aligned with, or there's something here that we haven't quite allowed ourselves to align with. We're not really sure about. And also what it feels like is that it's embedded. It's not quite there. And of course, we have a partial solar eclipse in Scorpio, which is a water sign that is about to happen. So we also have our 3rd quarter moon, which is in Cancer today. which is also a water sign. So third quarter moon is always a crisis in our consciousness. We had our full moon in Aries. It was conjunct with Chiron. And that whole week leading up to now has been the integration and the synthesis within ourselves of the two poles that become very obvious to us with the full moon. It is the subconscious realm, the intuitive, internal landscape, right? The way that we kind of navigate reality through our own feels is illuminated by the light of the sun. And that requires us to really integrate those energies together, because there's no reason not to. We have full awareness of what is often hidden and very much in the shadows, right? And the moon does not have her own light. She is reflecting the light of our sun, which is our heart, right? And so I get this sense here that there is something that is either still embedded, and I would say, of course, with the eclipse coming in Scorpio and what that represents, that there is very much a time of hibernation, or a time where it's not fully realized yet, but we're starting to get the impression here. And we are, at the very least, working now with how to reorient ourselves internally or in our own consciousness based on what we discovered or what was illuminated from the full moon about our own wounds of self, about our shame and guilt about who we are, the ways that we have withheld love because we have not been able to really be ourselves in the relationships that are outside of us, whether they be personal relationships, the relationship to society, the relationship to your work or your career, or even your spiritual work, your higher self, right? Your relationship to God, right? These are all relationships that are the foundation for our own integration and alchemy, which leads to our soul growth and evolution. So something here we know something has come to a close. That is pretty clear with the universe card. And the number 3 also represents coming back around to that original foundation and synthesis. And in fact, you're going to see in this reading that there's a lot of 3s here. So there's also a lot of this stable foundational but beginning of crystallization. So, but it's not emotionally obvious, right? It's just something that is a subtle feeling in our hearts. Maybe this horizontal placement represents that we haven't fully aligned with it. Maybe we're still kind of afraid. And in fact, when you look at the zebra as part of this reading, when we get there, I think there is some fear that we are still struggling to let go of, in regard to what it is that we know has closed out and that is a new cycle that is coming forward, that we are aligning with, right? That we are becoming not only perceptive, but attuned to the cosmic rhythm. So we have speaking of the 3, our effect here is the 3 of discs, or the 3 of pentacles. Mars in Capricorn. Boy, Mars loves being in Capricorn. It is where it's exalted in Capricorn. Mars loves to have a goal to accomplish. Now, in its reversal, again, sometimes this can mean that your energy is being dissipated, that you are not getting a return on whatever you're putting your energy into. And we'll go into this in more detail. But I also get a sense here, because Mars is going to station retrograde very soon. So actually on October 30th, Mars is going to station retrograde at 25 to 26 degrees Gemini. So I also get this sense here that we're going to go through this Mars retrograde time. And as much as we want to get down to business, it's going to be important that we allow ourselves the inner work that this 3 of discs, I think, really represents in its retrograde, okay? And if, in fact, we are not taking into account any of the other energies surrounding this, and we're just looking at it from a third density position, which many people may be doing, of cause and effect, then yeah, you could find sloppy work. You could find something that's not actually going to stand the test of of time, or will not be structurally sound, because while there is a cycle that is obviously completing, there's also a sense of not really aligning with the new energy, that is the new emotional, spiritual energy that is planting a seed. And that inadvertently is going to lead to shoddy workmanship, a sloppiness, a laziness, right? Or just not putting something into action. But there are plenty of aspects surrounding this that actually lead me to believe and read this, and my own energetic intuitive read, even before pulling any of these cards this morning, was very much in line with the same thing, that there is still more work to be done on the inside. And Mars is going to square Neptune 2 more times. And that first one was a doozy, right? The slap in the face was really just brutal with that first Mars square Neptune. So there'll be 2 more, right? November and into March. So keep in mind that this is a process that is still unfolding. And of course, Neptune is in Pisces, another water sign, right? So this Ace of Cups represents all of the water signs. So there is a lot of newness. There is the aspect of the eclipses, which embeds this energy at a soul. Like even the soul needs to go into its own underworld in some ways to do its work and to regenerate as a function of its own degradation and decay. So the best case scenario here is, with this Mars retrograde, is to really put that action, that fearlessness, that ambition, that drive that Mars represents into inner works, right? It only comes from the inside out. And one of the biggest struggles on this pathway and this spiritual journey that we all continue to struggle with, and is a daily thing, is that we continue to externalize our sense of connection to Source or God or our own divinity. And we do this through a lot of different ways. And it's sometimes really, really subtle. And sometimes it looks like we're on the right pathway, but we are externalizing it. So I really challenge you to consider, what are the ways that I am externalizing this process? Because everything you need, everything I need, everything we need is already part of our makeup as a soul in a material existence, right? Our connection to Source in this physicality is where we find the truth of who we are, right? We don't have to externalize it. And I would say that, even the things that have given us a lot of comfort and understanding, like our astrology chart, like our starseed origins, like the idea of all of this technology that can heal us, right? All of the scripture, all of these things that really do give us a sense of direction or understanding, as valuable as they are, they will fall away too, because at the end of the day, it's just us and our connection to divinity and God's plan, right? There is one timeline unfolding here, and it is the divine sacred timeline. The only choice we really seem to have here is how, where we're going to position ourselves and be in resonance with it. So we're either going to be in resonance in physicality, or we're going to be in resonance in some other form. But even the externalization of something like that is a way that we outsource something that you can't outsource. You just can't. And it's a struggle, right? Because we have lived in this density for our entire lives and multiple lifetimes, that's all we know, is to outsource it and externalize it. So even these tools will fall away. The intuitive readings, the tarot cards, the astrology, it all falls away in 5th density, because it's so rapid fire of manifestation at that point that there's no need for these tools. And in fact, you kind of keep yourself from being able to tap into that flow when you continue to outsource it. So in some ways, I feel like, that continuing these processes is probably giving the wrong signal or impression. But I also know that it's just part of the guideposts along the way. But to realize that this is not where it's at. This is just a guidepost. It's just a symbol. It's just meant to unlock what is already inherently embedded in us. And this three of discs, reversed, this Mars in Capricorn reversed, especially because what's in Capricorn? Pluto, right? Moving direct. That's another thing that has been absolutely gnarly, is that Pluto stationed direct, and it was like, bam, right? The destruction, the demolition, it all turned back on, and there's no turning back from that. So, and Mars and Pluto do rule Scorpio. And so Pluto rules Scorpio in that much more powerful soul essence, the central point of creation, which is the process of death and regeneration. But Mars is much more of a personally accessible energy when it comes to Scorpio as well. So I feel like that's where the real work needs to be done, and Mars in retrograde is going to allow for that if we take the challenge, right? If we are attempting to outsource it into the battle, then Mars retrograde is really going to be a difficult time, because so many things are going to, really lead us to question what it is we're even doing. And I know I have felt that, and I've had other people express this very same kind of like dynamic over the weekend, especially of like, what the fuck am I even doing, right? Mars retrograde is going to be a big time to actively engage that inner process of our own learning and our own consciousness growing within ourselves. Okay, so let's get into the specifics here, because that's where all the juiciness is. And of course, the imagery of the cards, right? So first, here we go. The universe, or the world. It depends on what you're using. In this deck, it is the universe. And like I said, this is where we find Neptune as cosmic consciousness, Pluto, as I said, the central power of creation, but the energy is of Saturn and Earth. This is the achieved goal. The work is done. Entirety and completion. And this also represents harmony between the spirit and body. Didn't we just talk about that? An inner independence. This is a big one. Do you see the big picture here? And this is what this is asking us. Cycles are coming to a conclusion, and there is a new cycle on the horizon. But part of this energy is being able to recognize the big picture, to recognize the completion, to recognize the achieved goal, whatever it is, so that we can allow the cycle to be concluded very consciously and move on to the new cycle. So there's so much imagery here that, take the time to look at here, because there is cycles upon cycles upon cycles in here that are really relevant to the idea of completion and eternity, right? It's not that it's done forever. It's that this particular goal or accomplishment has been achieved. So what is it that you have felt that you've come to some sort of completion, some sort of zenith in some ways? Because this is really going to set the tone for the rest of this reading and what it represents. Now, like I said, the Ace of Cups is in this horizontal position. And so when these cards come out like this, they, to me, represent, kind of this point of stasis that we haven't fully aligned with it, but it's not fully distorted or inverted either. So when you have the Ace of Cups upright, right, you have this web, right, this field of waves coming out of this central point, or this chalice, right, and there is energy coming out, energy coming up, and it's infinite, right? This cup is always overflowing because what's coming into it is infinite. And you can think of that as the energy coming into your heart space and reverberating out infinitely. Okay, so in this horizontal position, like I said, it does feel like that there are growing feelings, that sources of love are starting to come online, right? This new emotional beginning, there's healing and regeneration, an emotional capacity that is coming online that we may not have had until this cycle completes. Now in reversal, anxiety, drowning in past sorrows, irrational thinking, diffusion, I feel as if we are going to still be kind of struggling back and forth with these energies of the capacity and the new emotional beginning, and then finding ourselves kind of sinking back into the anxiety or the diffusion or drowning in past sorrows. So just be easy on yourself and really pay attention to what your heart is telling you, what it's actually revealing about who you are and your relationship to the world around you, because even in that vacillation, there's so much to learn, and to be easy on yourself, to be forgiving and compassionate towards yourself, right? So you may have screwed up. You may have realized that you put all this energy into something that maybe you don't want to really be doing, or it hasn't yielded the results. But that is, in fact, the cycle that has completed, right? That doesn't mean that those experiences are inherently inherently bad, or they're not useful, or they haven't learned anything. It is just, we're still very much learning to integrate these new experiences, these new emotional capacities and experiences. And I think that the eclipse cycle is a big part of this, and leading into the Mars retrograde. So considering that Mars does rule Scorpio along with Pluto, the more accessible, personal, the drive to get deeper, the drive to go get closer, the drive to get to the bottom of things is what Mars in Scorpio really represents. So we're going to have the drive, but in its retrograde, it's going to, you may find you turn on yourself. And this is saying that is very much a potential, but also that there is something new absolutely being seeded here, and it's emotional, it's spiritual, right? It's our connection to love and friendship and healing and regeneration. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. So at the root of our energetic axis here, right, where our power is really coming from, where what's going on in the subconscious realm, what's going on in those lower chakras, what's going on that hasn't really fully realized itself yet. Well, the Five of Scrolls, right? Because she's got multiple scrolls here, and she's picked one up and she's reading it. She is on this veranda, right? This beautiful landscape out there. She's in this beautiful indigo violet dress, right? Really relating to these upper chakras. Very interesting. Especially the pineal gland in particular. The diversity in this card in particular. Now, there's also another theme in this reading that you're going to see unfolding, which is the five, right? There's another 5. We have Hilarion, which is a number 5. We have the Light of the World that's come back. That's a 10, so 5 by 2. So there's also this energy as well that is part of it, which a lot of times the 5 is really the bottom of the bell curve, right? It is where we are kind of at the bottom of our awareness and coming back in. So the Five of Scrolls and diversity is really about a time to diversify and to consider the many options. Allow yourself to try new things and learn new subjects, okay? Break into different directions and understand that this is a period of expansion. So it's interesting that this is embedded here at the root, but I would say that this is important to consider, to leave a space here, right? To leave a space in these areas to expand, to diversify, to consider a new direction, right? You don't have to necessarily make the decision. And in fact, I would say that is exactly what you should not be doing, right? Because with Mars coming into its retrograde at the end of October, and all of this energy here, it's really not about moving forward as much as it is creating the space to be in attunement to the cosmos, to the divine blueprint, right? The sacred timeline that is unfolding. Maybe, just like I said earlier, it's not about choosing a timeline, it's about resonating with the place that we want to have within it. Right? And so maybe there's a new direction that we want to go. Maybe we haven't quite figured it out yet, but this is just now starting to come online, okay? This diversity and considering other options and being willing to actually consider them. So maybe this is just something that's running in the background. Maybe this is something that's coming out more in the dreamscape instead of actively being pursued. And I would say that this is something worth allowing for. I mean, for me personally, definitely. I mean, this is really resonant for me in particular. And to not be afraid. It's not like you're not going to lose everything about yourself if you consider a new direction or realize, you know what, it's time to expand somewhere else. It is time to diversify. There's nothing wrong with this, but it does require kind of a moment of stasis, right? Because you're not doing anything other than considering the options. So there's your first 5 in this whole thing. Now we come back to another 3, the 3 of forces. Now this is an energy of action, right? The forces are the wands or the fire energy. So there is action here with the 3 of forces. But what's the action about? It's about feathering the nest, right? It's about creating a space of expansion, right? You can see the little butterfly up there. The sun's rays are coming in. You see the 3 little birds. You see the mama bird that's feeding the little birds. Yes, there is action and there is expansion as well with this card in particular. It's a force of creativity. And this is about focusing on starting new things. But the nest has to be built. And this is a big part, in my opinion, about this 3rd quarter moon in Cancer today. So when we get into the fixed stars, when we get into the Sabian symbols of the moon in Cancer especially, this is the home territory of our moon is in the sign of Cancer. Think about how the action that you can take as we are all kind of like having our crisis moment of just like, well, what am I conscious of? Where is my consciousness? Perhaps it's about creating a space of expansion. Perhaps it is about feathering the nest. Perhaps it is about creativity as opposed to directionality. And of course, Cancer is a cardinal sign, right? So there is momentum here. And Libra is a cardinal sign. There is momentum. There's application, right? And in that 3rd quarter moon, it squares the sun. And so we know that there's a sense of cross purposes here that is going to challenge and trigger us in many ways in terms of how we express ourselves and what we're feeling intuitively in terms of what kind of space are we creating to allow in providence, right? How can we allow in that source of endowment, right? Or something that comes in that is really more of an inner strength, but is not something that we in our ego or individuality are acting on, but we're creating a space that allows this descent into our awareness, right? And so we have to create the space for it. We have to create the nest. And that's a very Cancerian type of energy. The nest, the womb, the family, right? The container that is strong and cohesive, right? And that is consolidated in order to hold our most vulnerable parts of ourselves, which is the water element and is our spirit, our feelings, right? We need our feelings to be vulnerable and still so that we can really see an accurate reflection of who we are in those still waters, right? And just like the little birds, right? They need a nest in order to grow. Just like us, any animal, right, needs to be in a womb or an egg or something in order to grow before it's ready to pop out. And just like the seed, the seed pops out, it grows, it reaches up out of the soil, and then the root system is where our power is consolidated. And what do the roots do? Well, among other things, the roots draw the water of the soul. We need this. And so if you need a place to put your conscious awareness, it's in this place. And I assure you that the 3rd quarter moon is going to reverberate, regardless if we are aware of it or not. And so this is a great way that we can make use of this energy is to focus our conscious awareness and our consciousness on what kind of space are we creating in our own minds, in our own endocrine system, right? That allows in this providence, this energy, what's going to draw the waters of our own soul into our experience. So it seems so interesting that the Five of Scrolls is on the bottom and that the Three of Force is on the top, you would think that they would, it's kind of counterintuitive in some ways, but I think this is exactly the right placement for everything, at least in terms of the way that I've been feeling it. So, and of course, we have the works, like I said, the Three of Discs, Mars and Capricorn. This is also the alchemical wedding. You have the Mercury, you have the sulfur, you have the salt, right? They're coming together in a alchemical process, and you can even kind of get this idea here that these wheels are spinning, right? They're kind of lifting this pyramid structure off the ground. And if you've ever seen any kind of hovercraft, or even just like any, like a helicopter, anything like that, when the blades or the wheels are turning, it's pushing the water out of the way. It's creating this wave. And it also kind of looks like liquid mercury. If you've ever seen mercury in its liquid form, it looks like this. And so it's getting also pushed out of the way. So the works, right? The idea here is that it's about manifestation, understanding, progress, crystallization. And when it's reversed, like I said, it has the sloppiness, the waste of time, the stop in the middle of the work. Now, if you are aware that Mars is going to be retrograde in just about a week or so, then you know that this is where the internal work with the upcoming Mars in retrograde, the internal execution of our drive and our ambition and our just our warrior nature, especially in Gemini, right? It's just like, why not utilize that Orion energy of resistance to actually do our own inner alchemy? I think this is where we're really going to see the most success in terms of all of this energy right now, especially because of where the axis of our power is really residing, in terms of, we know we want to diversify. We know there's going to be change, right? Something new is absolutely coming, but we want to create the right space. We want to expand the container that will allow our own soul to be realized in the situation very consciously. So let's look at some of the, let's look here at some of the guidance that's surrounding us, because we have some returning players. Number one, the light of the world, right? That's back. And so again, if you're struggling with the idea of the diversification and, allowing your inner workings to consider new options, to expand your focus, right? To look at other places that you can go. This is, the light of the world. Again, it's about your higher self and your divine essence knocking at the door, right? And there's the cat, right, telling the dude, like, hey, somebody's knocking at the door, right? We've seen this one already, and this is number 10. So here is another function of 5 here, which is you knock at the door, and if you don't answer, right, this is where you get caught in the feedback loop of the 1 and the 0, right, the off and the on. This is the false matrix, right? It's when we answer the door to our higher self and we kind of reach that point of the 11, when we realize that that's one and the same, right? Our higher self and our material existence, it's just a matter of answering the door, opening ourselves to it. So this is guidance around the diversification, which is about, maybe there's a new way or a different way that we haven't seen before that will allow us to unify or to embody our divinity more than we've allowed for already in the past. And maybe we haven't seen it because you don't know what you don't know, right? And so maybe we are learning what we don't know, so that allows us to even consider, oh, maybe I should consider other options here, or maybe my work is expanding, or my role in the world is changing. So this is the light of the world as the first piece of guidance. And of course, the animals are always always guides, always. And the weasel, for all of the negativity that's associated with this animal, and if somebody's called a weasel, this is really about being the silent observer. Be silent, pay attention. How are you going to hear your higher self knocking if you have all of this, all of this noise and all of this distraction, and you just keep inundating your awareness with all of this information that is just recycling, it's just all distraction. So this is about being the silent observer, really listening and paying attention to how you feel physically, right? We have to learn what energy feels like as it moves through and around us, and not allowing just what we see and just what we see, and not allowing just what the hologram in and of itself to determine what is for us. And so the weasel as a guide right now is giving us, the means in which to come into a closer contact, or to know when our higher self is knocking at the door, or our guidance system, or God, right? Be silent, pay attention, follow your breath, right? Operating for a pure observer position. So when you're connected to spirit, the natural world will speak to you and guide you. And I mean, it comes in lots of different forms: synchronicities, dreams, conversations, right? Just claircognizance, clairsentience, where you're just like, oh, I just had this epiphany out of nowhere, right? But it only can really come when you find that silence. So, taking the time away from the screen, taking time away from all of the information that is inundating us constantly. Maybe you need to go out into nature and leave your phone at home and just walk amongst the natural setting. Maybe this means more meditation. This is a big part of why the yoga program is starting now, because this is part of that process, is you learn to listen to your body and to attune yourself to the breath, right? So the weasel is a really good guide. Sorry, I'm getting distracted because now they're here and they're like, having their discussions and getting themselves set up for what they're going to do today. So I don't have my ear protection or my headphones, so that's okay. Well, let's move on. See, this is actually a lesson here. How do you keep yourself from being distracted by the outside influences? It's very difficult, right? So when we talk about the zebra here in terms of the expansion, right, the bird's nest, right, expanding, creating a space, this is let go of your fear and know that you're safe and protected at all times. So it can be very difficult at times to trust that God or source is going to enter your life when you need it. And this third quarter square is a big part of this today. So safe and protected is the name of the game for Cancer, right? The sign of Cancer, because that's what the consolidation and the decision and the framework of whatever it is that's holding your vulnerability is what is protecting you and keeping you safe, right? And there are real triggers to real challenges to your safety that should never be ignored. But PTSD is also a real thing. And we find ourselves reacting to situations based on previous neural pathways of real trauma that are still embedded in our circuitry and our body that have us react as if we're actually in danger. And then we don't open ourselves to the influence of spirit, to that providence that wants to come into our life, right? That new creation. So this is about let going your fear. And why the zebra? Well, the zebra is naturally capable of blending into the environment so that they are safe and protected, right? Their physical structure, the markings on their body allow them to blend in with the grasses in the savanna, and this is what protects the zebra, because otherwise they are kind of just out there waiting to be taken down by some sort of large predatory animal. So this is about letting go your fear, know that you're safe and protected at all times. And also the weasel too, it allows for all of us to, when we get really into that observer mode, then we know the difference between, okay, I'm being triggered into a trauma response that is not part of what's happening, or, okay, I need to go, or I need to move, or I need to take action. So when the time is right to take action, we will know what to do, and that will come through intuition. But if we are still tapped into our fear response, then we are going to be acting based on whoever is triggering that. And there are very likely things that are coming in the near future that are meant to do this. So part of this is preparing us in some ways for that process as well, so that we don't get caught up in a fear response that is not actually relevant to what's happening. We just think it is because it's being presented that way. So, and also that it's okay, that we are safe and protected, right? That we can open ourselves up to the influence of source or our own higher self without worrying about, if we're going to get eaten or not, right? So that's what the zebra provides in terms of guidance. And then here's Hilarion, number 5. So these two of Hilarion and the light of the world, they're very connected to each other. The research, right? The ability to really get into concrete knowledge and research and to take the time to pursue things and to use a logical approach to pursue information and truth is a big part of this. And the Ascended Master, this is somebody that is able to, that represents this energy and is someone that can be called upon in terms of a guide, in terms of a reference point, someone that we can look at and get a sense of and be able to, I don't want to say imitate necessarily, but to take the example that is being shown through this particular Ascended Master in terms of pursuing things from a logical approach. And that also goes along with recalibrating your nervous system, right? If you are looking and approaching the world around you with logic, with a sense of research, with a sense of evidence detection, actual evidence detection, then you can release all of the PTSD and the fear aspect and know that you're safe, right? And how else are you going to allow in your intuitive self, right? How are you going to feel safe enough to diversify your response to reality if you are continuing either outsourcing, right? Because what happens when that's gone? What happens if that's not enough anymore? What happens when those things, regardless if it's religion or science or the new age, whatever it is, what happens when that's not enough anymore because it's all coming from within? This is about this card is really a guidance point for that logical approach, to really look at the evidence of your own life and to be very focused there. And that, again, is part of the observation, to be silent, to observe, to really be singularly focused on what you are pursuing as well, or what you're trying to detect, okay? And this is also taking the emotional flare out of it as well, which was very difficult with the full moon, right? The full moon conjunct Chiron. I mean, there was a lot of that was part of the equation. And I definitely felt it over the course of the week really showing itself. And so now we're just like, okay, we felt those things. Now let's put them through our filter system of some logic, right? And I'm not saying that logic and intuition can't work together, because that's exactly what they're supposed to be doing, okay? That's exactly what they're supposed to be doing. That's the Virgo energy, right? And Hilarion, I feel like, is able to bring these two aspects together really seamlessly and represent an energy that can really guide us through a lot of this creative expansion that we know is coming and we want to create space for, and be able to put that energy of the works towards something internal. And specifically, we are talking about Capricorn. Mars in Capricorn is the 3 of discs. So we also know that it's working towards something that is a structure that is more than just ourselves, that is something that is provides security and is an institution of some sort, something that is a new materium of reality, right? But it starts from the inside. It's not going to come from the outside. There's no cheat codes here. And then we all wake up because we have access to certain things. It can't be that way. It won't be that way. And here we go with the noise. So hopefully it's not too distracting to you guys. So let's move on to the astrology here so that we can kind of ground this into an actual cycle of the cosmos here, and something that is relevant to right now. The cards are so great for unlocking the archetypal references and symbols within our own self, right? And then the astrology is that fourth density map, right? The map through time and space that allows us to really plot our own course as we unfold with the fractal that is also unfolding, that is reality. So let's bring up here, let me make sure that we have the, I'm going to make sure that we have the screen all formatted appropriately before we bring it over. All right, friends, here we go. So today is the 17th of October, as I said, and, you know, I went over this astrology a lot on Friday when I uploaded that video. So this is just to give us an idea here of the third quarter moon, how it's square to the sun, which is conjunct Arcturus and Spica. Venus is right there, so the moon is also going to be in a square to Venus today, just a few degrees behind the sun right now. And then, of course, Mars and the sun are in an air trine to each other. So what I want to really share with you about all of this actually is the energy of all of these fixed stars. So we're going to start, I think we'll start with Arcturus. And for those of you who are Arcturian starseeds, of course, you understand here that what all of these traits really represent and who, you know, your connection to them. So, but Arcturus is in the Boots or Bootes constellation. This is the ox herder or the sheep herder. And Arcturus is said to be in the knee, but this looks strangely just like the groin. And Arcturian energy is actually is more on the masculine kind of father end of things. Even though Libra is ruled by Venus, the strong Saturnian quality has this very paternal energy to it, and the sheep herder uses their energy to, you know, corral the flock, right? And will do, you know, use whatever tools are necessary in order to do that. So this is, Arcturus is where the sun is today, and this is where the sun is going to be squaring the third quarter moon. So when we look at Arcturus, just from a perspective of fixed star astrology, you know, there's a lot of things you can look up about it. Most of my resource right now is going to be from astrologyking.com, so you can check that out. All the fixed stars. Now, most of the resource that this website used when it talks about fixed stars is coming from either Ptolemy directly, or is coming from a book called by Vivian Robson, which is about fixed star astrology. So you can even go right to that source, but this is a great aggregate of all of these fixed stars and what they may mean in terms of ancient astrology and horary astrology. So you can always go and look at all of that. But there are a couple things that I want to bring up about Arcturus in particular. It's one of the fixed Bohemian stars, right? So the image is a horse or a wolf or a man dancing, right? So you have this this very active kind of masculine energy. It cures fevers, it retains the blood and acts as an astringent, and it rules plantain, which I think is interesting because that plant is very much like nature's band-aid. So retains the blood. That's very interesting, huh? So a lot of these fixed stars will rule certain parts of the body, and Arcturus in particular rules 2 inches below the navel, okay? And the other star that is in longitudinal conjunction, right? So in a different constellation, but they are in alignment now. And another starseed origin is the star Spica. And Spica is much more of the feminine, because Spica is actually the head of is in the head of the wheat grain that the Virgo or the Virgin or the Maiden is holding. So you can see that she's holding the head or the ear of the wheat, and Spica is here, and you can see Arcturus here. So they're actually much more aligned in the sky than this would represent, just because this particular drawing, I think, is about 2000. So accounting for precession, they're in the same whole degree now, which is 24 to 25 degrees. So Spica has much more of a feminine quality to it, obviously, and is also a Bohemian fixed star, meaning that it has this kind of magical quality to it and is in relation to certain plants and certain images, and it's ruled by certain minerals and elements, and it gives riches and overcomes contention and removes scarcity, all of the things that you would consider with the fruit of the harvest, right? And rules emerald and sage and mandrake and stuff like that. So it is truly one of the great stars. And Spica starseeds are, at this point, they are much more common than they have been. Just because of precession, they are in the same degree now as Arcturus. And so, but depending on when you were born, Spica is not going to necessarily be in the same place. And so I found that Spica starseeds are pretty rare. And it's a good star, right? It usually has a lot of good stuff attached to it. Just like I said, it gives riches and overcomes contentions, right? So the sun is conjunct both Arcturus and Spica right now, which is really setting us up for not only more of the masculine kind of herding, right? Like drawing in the flock and consolidating that power and using much more of a kind of a masculine paternal energy. And Arcturian starseeds, they are really individuals that find themselves being kind of like a guide or a teacher or a wisdom keeper and sharing that knowledge, right? You're actually doing something very similar in some ways, which is kind of this whole being able to bring in or herd the energy in, okay? Spica also rules the navel itself. So you have Spica at the navel, and you have Arcturus, which is 2 inches below, which is very much in alignment with the sacral chakra. So there's also this energy with these two things that has to do with, these lower chakras, where our power comes from, where our power of creation comes from. And there's a lot of honor and fame that goes along with Spica in terms of its fixed star or ancient astrology as well. So with the sun and Venus here, conjunct these two, especially the sun, but soon to be Venus, we have a really good balance of energy right now with these two very important stars that give success and renown and riches and a very sweet disposition with Spica, and then Arcturus that is, a guardian, really. And so I think that we can really, if we can find a way to really identify ourselves with this energy, as much as it seems to challenge our ability to remain vulnerable and open, in some ways, this is exactly what we want to do in our conscious awareness, right? The sun and our sustainment and our spiritual expression, in order to allow the inner space to be vulnerable and to be expanded enough for something new to come in, right? We don't want to completely cover ourselves, and we certainly don't want to be like the turtle pulling back into the shell. I mean, that is part of protecting ourselves, and that is part of making sure that we don't leave ourselves vulnerable to any kind of attack or anything. But this really is very favorable today in terms of where the sun is and the fact that we are guarded, we are protected. It's our own hearts, honestly, that do both of these things. While the heart is meant to be vulnerable and tender and allow us to be compassionate, it also is the exact same thing that allows us to create that field around us that is a guardian. And when we can align with that, then our most tender, vulnerable, emotional parts of ourselves, which represented by the moon, can actually expand and be open in order to receive something uncommon, something that we may not have even expected. So that's Arcturus and Spica, which is where the sun is at today. So the other things that now there's another particular connection here that I really want to bring up. And that was what I talked about earlier, which is the fact that we don't see it necessarily in this chart, but Juno, asteroid Juno, is over in Pisces, 7 to 8 degrees Pisces, and asteroid Ceres is over here at 7 to 8 degrees Virgo, which is in conjunction with Alpha Draconis. So we have this axis of Draco that is being aspected by these two goddess asteroids today. So, you know, in terms of fixed stars and ancient astrology, Alpha Draconis or Thuban doesn't have a lot of action associated with it. For how much play the galactic mythology is giving the Draco in terms of their connection to everything, fixed star Thuban doesn't have a lot of sway in ancient astrology, other than it was the pole star 3,000 years ago, and there is a major connection in one of the Great Pyramids of Giza, a shaft that leads right up to Alpha Draconis. But where is Thuban? Fixed star Thuban is in the Draco constellation. It's in the tail, right? And as you know, in the nodes of the moon in evolutionary astrology and in Vedic astrology as well, the tail of the dragon, or Ketu, or the south node, is where we're coming from. This is our karmic history. This is the tail that is swishing back and forth as the dragon flies to its destiny, or whatever it's going to, that gives us the momentum forward. But it is not the direction we are going. It is what is providing the framework in order to create something new. Just like the root system is what is allowing the plant to draw the energy into it in order to grow and mature the fruit that has the seed of the next cycle, okay? Now, what's interesting, so Ceres, asteroid Ceres, the goddess of the grain and agriculture and the seasonal changes, is in conjunction with Thuban. Now, opposite of that is the fixed star. Let's see if I can pronounce it correctly. Sadashbia. I don't even know if that's true, right? Because a lot of these fixed star names are coming from Arabic roots. So this is in the constellation of Aquarius, and it is at currently at 7 degrees Pisces. So 7 to 8 degrees Pisces in the zodiac. So this is in the right shoulder of Aquarius, right? The water bearer. And this star in particular is pretty remarkable in terms of what it represents. It's something that is revealing. It reveals something that's hidden. The lucky star of hidden things it's what it's called. And so in horary astrology, it indicates the ability to discover that which is hidden or lost, especially when the star is emerging, or like in the heliacal rising of the star, which is not happening right now. So what I think is really interesting about this opposition here is that Juno, the asteroid Juno, who is the advocate, right? If Jupiter, her husband, is the lawyer, right? For instance, Juno, or Hera, she's the advocate in the courtroom. She is the one that actually she's the one, if Aphrodite or Venus is holding the scales and measuring them, Juno is the one that represents the course of action that needs to be taken in order to fulfill whatever that balance really is, okay? So the fact that Juno is retrograde and in conjunction with here really says to me that there is also going to be, there is something hidden here. And it may not be hidden to us, right? And our own personal advocate here, maybe, this is just a function of ads all over the Astrology King website, because, that's what happens when you have a free website on WordPress or whatever. It's just riddled with ads. So many distractions. It's so great. Asteroid Juno is retrograde. So while there is this sense of what, the process of our own cycles, right? Ceres representing agriculture, so representing the seasonal cycle that influences farming and, the growing of the grain. And who's holding the grain? right? It's Virgo, the maiden, right? Where Spica is. There's all these connections to the process of what is it that is necessary for this growth and maturation and ripening, and then the regeneration that comes from the decay and going into the underworld, right? Ceres, her daughter is Persephone, right? She goes into the underworld, she gets tricked into the underworld and becomes the bride of Pluto or Hades. And, there was a deal that was brokered basically for half the year. Persephone can come back and be with her mother, and then the other half she has to be in the underworld with her husband, the king of the underworld. And during that time, Ceres, in her grief, really shuts down, and this helps explain, the seasonal cycle of the winter, right? The hibernation, how everything has to go into its own underworld in order to be regenerated and then come back anew. So while that aspect is following a very specific, refined protocol, right, with Virgo and in especially Alpha Draconis, right? Because that represents the ability to follow through a particular set, like I said, a protocol, right? In order to express oneself, we have to go through this process. But there's something here with asteroid Juno in its opposition that is like, hey, there's something here. There is a nugget of wisdom here. There is something hidden that is only really revealed to us through our own sense of balance and equilibrium. And maybe it's not obvious yet. And in fact, I would say that it's not. And I think that this opposition today really speaks to that. And the water bearer in Aquarius, he's pouring the water, right? The waters of our own soul are being released into the cosmos here based on Aquarius and the ability to hold that energy. So, and it's his right shoulder that the container, the vessel is on, and then he pours it out. So there's something here that is very much embedded, and we can only really have it revealed to us when we find that quiet place within ourselves rather than looking for it outside of ourselves anywhere. I think that's really the big thing that I wanted to bring up today. The last actually thing I want to bring up is the fact that Mars is conjunct is in 25 degrees of Gemini. It's in that trine to Arcturus and to Spica, where the sun is today, and it's on the tip. It's on the tip of the southern horn of the bull, right? This is where Mars is in conjunction right now. It's 25 degrees Gemini, and this is a star that's got a large, strong Mars quality to begin with. So there's also this sense here of where are we going to put this energy that is very striking, right? That is really meant to be pushed forward, especially when we know that it's going to go retrograde and come back over this point in a more internalized direction. Well, I would offer that it's the pruning. Right? It's the pruning away of that which is infinitely expanding that is not going to yield anything. And this is where that diversification really comes into effect. And it's not so much that we should not allow ourselves to diversify or expand. It's more that knowing that when the time is right, we're going to singularly, push this energy out, right? Because Mars is that output. Push it out towards the places where it is going to yield the most results. But right now, we have to keep in mind that we don't have all the information, right? So it's important to realize that the Spica and the Arcturian energy that is enshrined to Mars right now is allowing us to see the big picture, right? To know that something has come to some sort of conclusion and not to act out of like the bull seeing red, right? Imagine, in that anger and that really strong output that we do damage, right? It's not about doing damage, and it's certainly not about just expanding out into infinite space. It is about pruning back. There will be a time where this comes back over, and then we're actively pruning. And we have singularly focused our attention, our energy, and our output towards exactly what we want to be doing. But this is going to take some time, right? We have to give ourselves the space and the time and the silence and the observable, the observational, that's what I'm trying to say, component to know the big picture, so that we aren't just like flailing around, or we're not just butting, heads or doing damage in a way that can't be undone later, right? You don't want to make hasty moves and be like, you know what, screw this, because that can happen too. And you don't want to destroy everything that you have grown so far. You just want to prune it back so that it actually yields what you want. So there's a lot of hidden elements today. And it can seem really scary, and we could feel like that we're not very safe if we don't know exactly what's going on and what we're doing. But I assure you, everything is kind of setting us up to learn to trust our inner voice, to trust our guidance system, our own intuition, and to know that God speaks to us through that mechanism. And when it's time to actually put that energy outwards, which is not going to be until March, when Mars comes out of its retrograde and eventually comes out of its shadow, right? We have a lot of time here of internal works that is going to be very difficult for people, but I think it's necessary to really wrap our heads around this. And there's so much support right now for this process. So I think that's all I have for you guys today. So really just beautiful messages coming through. I know it's been really, really tough lately. Like I said, that slap in the face was no joke. And please take care of yourself and reach out for support when you need it. And also reach in for support when you need it, because that's where you're really, really going to find it. Not that you can't get support outside of you. Obviously, if you're listening to this, that is part of what you're doing for yourself. But it's gonna be okay, guys. So thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you so very much. Thank you for tuning in. If you find value in this content and you want to support this channel growing, please subscribe to this channel. You hit the like button, you comment, you share. It all has an impact on this channel growing. If you are still interested in the 21-day yoga program, you can go to catalystenergies.net. All my current offerings are right there on the homepage, and I'm actually doing some updates to my website so that you can check out and pay for services directly through the website. And that's going to be live very soon, sometime this week. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. And I mean, like, being here on Earth during this time, because everybody that's here on Earth during this time is here for a very specific reason. And it's all part of the sacred fractal unfolding. We all have our place within it. And really, it's up to us how we want to place ourselves, where we want to place ourselves, and where we want to be resonating with this whole process. So I love you guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being flexible and humoring all of the things that I can't control in this whole process. I really do appreciate it very much. And I'll see you next time. Bye.